The floorboards at Mission San Miguel still remember the blood. It all started with a mistake. A rancher named William Reed, flashing his gold to a crew of strangers, wanted men who smiled to his face and returned in the dead of night with axes. They butchered every last one of them, 11 souls, the men, the women, even the children. It's said that on the anniversary of the killings, the stains reappear on that floor, a dark, wet reminder of a promise broken by pure greed. That kind of violence, it doesn't just wash away. In California, it soaks into the ground. It stains the adobe walls and echoes in the bell towers. This land is rich with history, a history written in blood, greed and tragedy, long before the Hollywood signs went up. From the Spanish missions built on native burial grounds to the rough-and-tumble gold rush towns where a man's life was worth less than the dust in his pan, every chapel, every cathedral has a story buried beneath the foundations, and some refuse to stay buried. Tonight, we aren't just telling ghost stories. We are walking the unholy grounds where California's history refuses to die. We'll stand on the spot where a man called Yankee Jim still chokes on a hangman's rope. We'll listen for the phantom organ music played by a spectral nun in a desecrated crypt. We will face the silent hooded monk who does nothing but watch. These are the accounts of real people who walked into a house of God and came face to face with something else entirely. We're about to show you why some doors are better left locked. Welcome to the 13 most terrifying sacred places in California. Haunted Church number 1. Mission San Miguel Arcángel, San Miguel, California. There are places in California where the ground itself has a memory of blood. Places where so much violence has soaked into the soil, into the timber and the stone, that it can never be scrubbed clean. Our journey into California's unholy grounds begins at one such place, a house of God founded in 1797 by Franciscan missionaries, a beacon of faith intended to bring salvation to the Salinan people. For 50 years, it stood as a symbol of devotion, but devotion is a fragile thing. Today, when you walk through its long, cool corridors, the first thing you notice is the silence. It's a heavy, listening kind of quiet, the kind that makes the hair on your arms stand up. The thick adobe walls, designed to keep out the heat of the Central Coast, also seem to keep something else trapped inside. The air smells of dry dust, old wax and a deep, profound sorrow that clings to everything. You get the feeling you're not just walking through a museum, you're walking through a tomb. And the occupants are still here. This mission's dark history was sealed in the winter of 1848. California was a wild, lawless place, a land of opportunity and of brutal consequences. The mission was no longer run by the church. It was the private home of an Englishman, a former sailor named William Reed. He lived there with his entire family, his wife Maria, who was pregnant with their next child, their children, and an assortment of relatives and workers. Reed had just returned from the northern gold fields, his pockets heavy and his judgment poor. He made a fatal mistake. He boasted of his newfound wealth to a group of strangers he'd offered shelter. They were fellow Englishmen, deserters from a warship called the Warren, men like Joseph Rees and Peter Remmer. Men with nothing to lose. Reed, a sailor himself, likely felt a kinship. He gave them food, he gave them drink, he showed them kindness. They repaid him by returning in the dead of night. They didn't just rob him, they executed an annihilation. Armed with axes and knives, they moved from room to room. No one was spared, not Reed, not his pregnant wife, not their young son. They murdered his wife's brother, a visiting midwife, a nephew, a Native American shepherd, anyone who had the misfortune of being inside those walls. 11 souls, butchered in a frantic hunt for gold. The killers were tracked down by a posse days later, and frontier justice was swift and final. But the horror they unleashed, that never left the mission, it stayed. Modern-day visitors, those who know the story, and those who don't, all report the same thing. In the rooms where the Reed family once lived, an inexplicable cold descends, a deep, penetrating chill that has nothing to do with the weather. Staff members working after hours have been paralyzed by the sudden frantic cries of a woman coming from an empty chamber. Others have heard the distinct sound of children's footsteps running on the floorboards above them, only to confirm the second floor is, and always has been, completely empty. But the most infamous piece of evidence, the one that brings paranormal investigators from all over the world, are the stains. For decades, it has been claimed that on the anniversary of the massacre, dark coppery patches appear on the original wooden floors of the living quarters. They are said to look, undeniably, like blood. Attempts to scrub them away fail, and by the next morning, they simply vanish on their own. Electronic voice phenomena sessions have captured what sound like a child's whisper, a single sad word. No, paranormal researchers believe Mission San Miguel is home to one of the most powerful residual hauntings ever documented. The sheer terror and trauma of that night, the betrayal, the violence, the despair, was so extreme that it left a permanent psychic scar on the environment. It's not an intelligent ghost you're interacting with, it's a memory. A horrific film loop playing over and over for more than a century and a half. So when you walk through those hallowed haunted halls, and you feel that sudden cold, and you hear that faint whisper on the wind, what are you truly sensing? Is it the weight of a terrible history pressing down on you? Or is it something more? Is it the tormented energy of 11 souls, forever locked in their final terrifying moments, still waiting for a peace that will never ever come? Haunted Church number 2. The Old Adobe Chapel. Old Town, San Diego. Not all ghosts are born in the places they haunt. Some arrive first, and wait. In the sun-drenched historic heart of Old Town San Diego, there sits a small, humble, unassuming church, the Old Adobe Chapel. It looks peaceful, serene even, but its connection to the paranormal is infamous, forever tied to the notorious Whaley House, which stands just a stone's throw away. Most people think the horror belongs to the Whaley family, but they're wrong. The house, the chapel, all of it, it's just scenery. The real haunting belongs to the land itself, and the ghost that claims it is one of California's most furious. Before this was a tourist spot, before the chapel was consecrated, before the first brick of the Whaley House was ever laid, this was a place of public death. This was where the city erected its gallows. And in 1852, a man known as James Robinson, Yankee Jim, was brought here to die. He was a big man, over 6 feet tall, a known troublemaker convicted of grand larceny. The townspeople gathered to watch the spectacle, to see justice done, but the justice they witnessed that day was imperfect. The gallows were makeshift, built on the back of a wagon. When the cart was pulled away, the crowd expected a swift, clean end. But because of Yankee Jim's height, his feet could still scrape against the wagon bed. The rope didn't snap his neck, it only tightened. He didn't drop, he dangled. For more than 15 agonizing minutes, a spectacle of horror unfolded as this giant of a man kicked and fought, his face turning purple slowly, horribly, strangling to death in front of an entire town. One of the men in that crowd, a man named Thomas Whaley, watched the gruesome display, and just a few years later bought the very land Yankee Jim's body had hung above. He built his house there, and later the chapel was established nearby. But they had built on cursed ground. Yankee Jim had already staked his claim. For years, when the chapel was still used as a private residence, the families living within its walls reported a phenomenon so terrifying it's hard to even comprehend. They would be woken from a dead sleep by an immense crushing weight on their chests, an unseen force, pinning them to their beds, their lungs burning, unable to draw a breath. It was the phantom reenactment of Yankee Jim's slow strangulation, a terrifying physical assault from beyond the grave. Even today, visitors to the chapel suddenly smell it, the strong, thick phantom scent of cigar smoke, Yankee Jim's favorite vice, a sign that he is close and that he is watching. Paranormal investigators who dare to enter this space report that the activity is not random, it is intelligent, and it is angry. Cold spots aren't just patches of cool air. They are often described as a tall, man-shaped column of freezing temperature that stands in the very spot where the gallows once were. EMF detectors, which measure electromagnetic fields, don't just flicker, they scream, their needles redlining as if a massive source of energy is passing right through them. Audio recordings have captured deep, guttural whispers that seem to answer direct questions, with words like, "get out," or a low, possessive growl that sounds like the word mine. Unlike the looping tragedy at Mission San Miguel, this is no mere memory. Paranormal researchers classify the entity here as an intelligent, territorial, and deeply malevolent spirit. This is a ghost that knows you are there. It interacts. It threatens. It is fueled by the boundless rage of its own agonizing end, and it seems to relish inflicting that suffering on anyone who trespasses on the ground where it died. He is not replaying a scene. He is inviting you to be a part of it. So what is the force that lingers in the old Adobe Chapel? Is it just the residual anger of a man cheated out of a clean death? Or is it something more? A furious, spectral landlord, forever bound to the small patch of earth where his life was so brutally taken, daring anyone to challenge his claim. A brutal murder fueled by greed, a botched execution born from crude justice. The ghosts of California are so often born from the cruelty of man. But what happens when the horror isn't man-made? What happens when the earth itself opens up and swallows a congregation whole, silencing their prayers with the grinding of stone? In one of California's most beautiful missions, a tragedy so immense left behind more than just ruins. It left behind voices that still cry out from the rubble, and a love story that continues long after death. Haunted Church Number 3, Mission San Juan Capistrano. They call it the Jewel of the Missions, a place of stunning beauty, of vibrant gardens, flowing fountains, and the legendary swallows that return each spring. It feels like a sanctuary, a pocket of peace preserved in time. People come here to get married, to walk the romantic corridors, to feel a connection to a simpler past. But the beauty of this place is a mask. Because on one December morning, over 200 years ago, this sanctuary became a tomb in less than 2 minutes. Walk the grounds as the sun begins to set. The scent of jasmine and night-blooming flowers hangs heavy in the air. The sounds of the city fade away, replaced by the gentle splash of water and the rustle of old pepper trees. It's enchanting, until you approach the ruins of the great stone church. Here, the atmosphere changes. The air grows still, and a coldness seeps up from the ground, a deep sorrow that the California sun can't seem to burn away. This is a place where something broke, and it never truly healed. It was December 8, 1812, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, a major holy day. The magnificent Great Stone Church, the grandest church in all of California, was filled with worshippers for morning mass. It had taken them nearly a decade to build this masterpiece of stone and mortar, a 6-story bell tower reaching proudly into the sky. It was a monument to their faith, and their faith was about to be shattered. At 7 in the morning, the ground began to heave. It wasn't a tremor, it was a violent, roaring convulsion of the earth. The massive stone walls began to twist, and the high vaulted ceilings cracked like eggshells. The congregation, trapped inside, looked up in terror as the giant dome overhead began to crumble. The priests near the altar screamed for everyone to run to the sacristy, but there was no time. The bell tower groaned, tore away from the main building, and collapsed inward. The entire roof of the great stone church imploded, burying 40 souls in an instant. Among them 2 young boys who had been ringing the morning bells, now silenced forever under tons of rock and shattered faith. The earthquake leveled the church, but it gave birth to its ghosts. The most heartbreaking of all is a young woman named Magdalena. The story goes that she was a local girl, deeply in love, her heart full of hope for the future, a future that was crushed along with her body on that terrible morning. And while the rubble was cleared, while the mission was rebuilt around the ruins, Magdalena's spirit never left. For centuries, visitors and staff have seen her, the Lady in White, a beautiful, sorrowful, translucent figure who glides silently through the mission's gardens and across the rubble of her stone tomb. She never makes a sound, she never threatens, she only searches, her form radiating a grief so powerful it's almost unbearable to witness. They say she is looking for the lover she lost, a search that will never end. And just as you think you can get close enough to see her face, she dissolves into the night mist. But she is not the only echo here. On the anniversary of the quake, and on nights when the fog rolls in thick and damp from the ocean, people hear it. The clear, distinct metallic tolling of bells, the bells that were buried in the collapse. Some believe it's the spirits of the 2 young bell ringers, still dutifully at their post, forever calling the faithful to a service that will never begin. Investigators have left digital audio recorders running overnight in the ruins, and have returned to find something incredible, the unmistakable sound of a large, heavy mission bell, ringing clearly in the dead of night, captured for all to hear. Photographs taken around the ruins have developed with strange, inexplicable mists and human-like shapes that weren't there when the picture was taken. This isn't the rage of a single vengeful spirit. This is something different. This is the collective sorrow of a community destroyed. Experts believe a mass tragedy like the 1812 earthquake can create a vast residual haunting, an emotional echo of the event. And a spirit like Magdalena, with her own powerful story of lost love, becomes a focal point for all that pain. Her personal grief is the face of the mission's own broken heart. Is her lonely spirit truly wandering these grounds forever searching for a love she can never find? Or is she simply a manifestation of a tragedy so profound it can never truly be over? Nature's fury, a tragic past etched in stone. So often the dead are trapped by events beyond their control. But sometimes the horror isn't buried by an act of God, it's unearthed by the hands of man. In the sprawling concrete heart of Los Angeles, a city that loves to reinvent itself, they decided to move a cathedral. But they forgot one thing. When you move the dead from their final resting place, sometimes they don't go quietly, and sometimes one of them decides to stay behind and let the living know just how angry she is. Haunted Church Number 4. The former Cathedral of St. Fibana, downtown Los Angeles. We are taught that death is the final peace, a sacred rest that should never be disturbed. But what happens when that promise is broken? What happens when a city's progress demands that the dead give up their graves? In the concrete heart of Los Angeles, surrounded by skyscrapers and the constant hum of traffic, stands a magnificent building. Today, it's known as Fibana, a premier venue where the city's elite celebrate weddings and galas. But for more than 100 years, this was the Cathedral of St. Fibana, the spiritual center for millions of Catholics. It was built in 1876, a consecrated space made doubly holy by the relics of St. Fibana herself, a 3rd-century martyr, whose remains were entombed beneath the main altar. This wasn't just a church, it was a reliquary, a fortress of faith. But fortresses can fall. In 1994, the Northridge earthquake ripped through Los Angeles, leaving the cathedral severely damaged. After a long and bitter fight, the archdiocese made a decision that would echo in the supernatural world for years to come. They would build a new cathedral and sell the old one. But there was a condition. Before the building could be handed over, it had to be deconsecrated. The buried had to be moved. Imagine the scene. Deep in the basement, in the cold, silent crypt, the tombs of the city's archbishops and clergymen who had rested in peace for nearly a century were broken open. Their remains were exhumed, boxed up and carted away. It was a violation of the most sacred trust, and it was the moment that the haunting began. The first to notice were the construction workers, the hardened no-nonsense crews hired to transform the holy space into a party venue. They started hearing things. Late at night, long after the power had been cut, the thunderous, mournful sound of a massive pipe organ would suddenly blast through the empty hall, a phantom requiem from an instrument that had already been removed. On the high balconies where the choir once sang, workers would see them fleeting, dark figures that looked like monks in robes, looking down on the work below with an air of silent, cold disapproval. They would vanish the moment they were seen. But the most persistent and most terrifying presence is that of a woman, a nun. The activity is always strongest in the basement, the former crypt. Event staff who work there today will tell you, you do not go down there alone. You can be setting up for $1 million wedding with music and laughter upstairs, but the moment you step onto the basement stairs, the air changes. It becomes cold, heavy, and full of sorrow. That's when you hear it. The distinct, heartbreaking sound of a woman weeping, echoing from the darkest corners of the empty rooms. Those who have been brave enough or foolish enough to try and find the source of the weeping have felt it, an icy touch on their arm, a cold breath on their neck. Some have even heard their own name whispered from the shadows, a soft pleading sound that turns their blood to ice. Paranormal investigators have captured stunning evidence within these walls. Not just muffled noises, but Class A EVPs, electronic voice phenomena of a woman's clear sobbing voice recorded in the absolute silence of the crypt. The phantom organ music, too, has been captured on audio, a full complex melody with no earthly source. Experts believe the haunting of Fibana is a classic poltergeist-style event, triggered by a specific act of desecration. Unlike the looping tragedies of the missions, the activity here is intelligent, and it is reactive. The exhumation of the bodies was a spiritual alarm bell, awakening a furious guardian spirit, or perhaps the collective anger of all those whose eternal rest was so casually violated. Some theorize the crying nun isn't the ghost of one specific person, but a manifestation of the building's own desecrated spirit, the anguish of a holy place forced to host worldly events. So as the rich and famous dance and drink champagne on the main floor, they are blissfully unaware of the profound sadness and anger that festers just one floor below. A sorrowful nun, forever weeping in a crypt that is no longer a crypt, a prisoner in her own deconsecrated home. It leaves you with one chilling question: what price would you pay for a broken promise of rest in peace? An angry nun, a vengeful hanged man. Some spirits make their presence known with sound and fury. They want you to know you've trespassed. They want you to feel their rage. But there is another kind of terror, a quieter kind, a horror that doesn't scream in your face. It just watches. In a coastal mission town, there is a figure who has been seen for decades. He doesn't move. He doesn't speak. He just stands in the shadows of the sanctuary, a silent, hooded guardian observing all who enter, and his unending watch is more frightening than any scream. Haunted Church Number 5, Mission San Buenaventura, Ventura, California. There is a primal fear, older than any story, that is coded into our very DNA. It is the fear of being watched, not by a predator you can see, but by a silent, unknown intelligence hidden in the shadows. A scream is terrifying, yes, a violent outburst is shocking, but nothing unnerves the human soul quite like the slow, creeping realization that you are not alone, and that unseen eyes are fixed upon you. Our next stop takes us to the coast, to a place of enduring faith, Mission San Buenaventura. This is a special place. It was the last mission founded by Father Junipero Serra himself, the architect of the entire California mission system. Since its dedication on Easter Sunday in 1782, it has been an active church without interruption. It has survived fires, pirate raids, and devastating earthquakes. It is a bastion of resilience, and it is home to a silent watcher. To walk into the old mission church is to feel that unbroken line of history. The air is cool and smells faintly of sea salt from the nearby ocean, mixed with the scent of century-old wooden pews and the lingering memory of incense. It feels peaceful at first, but stay a while. Stand in the sanctuary when it's empty. Let the silence settle around you. Soon a different feeling begins to creep in. It starts at the back of your neck, a prickling sensation. You have the unshakable feeling that you are being observed, scrutinized, even by someone standing just out of sight. For decades, priests, parishioners, and late-night staff have all told the same story. They have seen him, the hooded monk. He appears without warning. Sometimes he is a tall, dark figure standing in the back of the church, his face completely obscured by the deep shadow of a Franciscan cowl. Other times, he is seen gliding silently through the mission's lush gardens, his robes making no sound on the gravel path. He never speaks, he never interacts, he never threatens, he simply watches. A profound sadness seems to emanate from him, a sorrow so deep it chills the very air. Staff members have learned to recognize the signs of his approach, a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature that will make you see your own breath, and a smell, the powerful, unmistakable scent of old ceremonial church incense, filling a room that has no lit censers. One terrified janitor, working late one night, saw the figure standing at the end of a long hallway. Mustering his courage, he took a step forward and called out, "Hello?" The monk turned its head slowly, and then, impossibly, faded directly into the solid adobe wall, leaving the janitor alone, his heart hammering against his ribs in the sudden absolute silence. In an age of constant surveillance, even this ancient spirit gets caught. Security camera footage from inside the mission has captured bizarre anomalies that defy easy explanation. There are no clear images of the monk himself, but there are fleeting, man-sized shadows that dart across empty rooms in the blink of an eye. There are glowing orbs of light that move with intelligent purpose, zigzagging through the sanctuary before vanishing. It's the evidence of a presence that does not want to be fully seen, but makes no effort to fully hide. Paranormal experts who study the mission agree this is not a violent poltergeist or a residual memory. They believe the hooded monk is a guardian spirit, a watcher. Perhaps he is the ghost of a long-dead friar, so devoted to his church that he has refused to leave his post. The sadness he projects could be sorrow for a world that has changed so much around his sacred sanctuary. The fear he inspires comes not from any malicious intent, but from the deeply unnerving act of being studied by a being from another time, another reality. Who is this silent, sorrowful guardian? What is he watching for, or what is he waiting for? Perhaps the most unsettling ghosts aren't the ones who want to cause you harm. Perhaps they are the ones who simply want to watch you, forever. A weeping nun, a watching monk. The ghosts of the church are so often tied to their faith, even after death. But what happens when the haunted ground isn't a church, but a place built for a different kind of eternal devotion, the devotion of fans? In the heart of Hollywood, there is a final resting place for the stars. A place where the tragedies of fame and the desperation of unfinished lives echo not through quiet cloisters, but through cold marble halls. Here, the spirits aren't holy, they're famous, and they're not at peace. Haunted location number 6, the Abbey of the Psalms Chapel and Mausoleum. Hollywood Forever Cemetery, Hollywood, California. Hollywood, it's a town built on dreams, a place where people come to become immortal. But for every star that lights up the sky, 100 more crash and burn. It's a town of ambition, scandal, and tragedy. And for some of its most famous residents, not even death is an escape. In the very heart of Hollywood, there is a final resting place for the legends, a place where the ghosts of the silver screen continue their eternal performance. Welcome to Hollywood Forever Cemetery. The name itself is a promise and a curse. This is the afterlife's red carpet, home to icons like Rudolph Valentino, Judy Garland, and Cecil B. DeMille. And at its heart stands the Abbey of the Psalms, a magnificent, cold marble mausoleum. It was built as a final opulent stage for the dead, but the performances here are not for the living. To step inside is to enter another world. The roar of Santa Monica Boulevard vanishes, replaced by an unnerving, echoing silence. Every footstep on the polished marble floor sounds like a gunshot in the stillness. The air is thick, not with sorrow, but with something else: ego, ambition, desperation. It's the collective psychic energy of thousands of souls who lived and died for the spotlight. You feel watched, not by one entity, but by a silent, judgmental audience of the dead. And the main event, the tragedy that defines this haunting, is the story of Virginia Rappe. It was 1921, the roaring 20s. Hollywood was a whirlwind of jazz, illegal booze, and career-ending scandals. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was one of the biggest comedy stars on the planet, second only to Chaplin. He threw a wild 3-day party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. Among the guests was a young aspiring actress named Virginia Rappe. What happened in that hotel room, room 1219, is still a mystery. All we know for sure is that Virginia fell violently ill and died 4 days later from a ruptured bladder. The story exploded. Arbuckle was accused of her brutal rape and manslaughter. The newspapers, hungry for a scandal to bring down the debauchery of Hollywood, convicted him in the court of public opinion. He faced 3 sensational trials. The first 2 ended in hung juries. The third ended in a full acquittal, with the jury issuing a formal apology to him. But it was too late. His career was destroyed. His name was ruined. He became a Hollywood pariah. Virginia Rappe was buried here, in the Cathedral mausoleum adjacent to the Abbey, and many believe her tormented, restless spirit is the epicenter of the haunting. Visitors have seen her ghost for decades, a woman in black, weeping inconsolably near her crypt, her heartbroken sobs echoing through the cold, empty halls. Others have heard soft whispers and felt unseen hands brush past them in the corridor where she is interred. But she is not alone. Another prominent spirit is seen pacing anxiously near the Abbey's entrance. A man in a dated suit, his face a mask of pure despair, who vanishes the moment you look directly at him. No one knows who he is. A forgotten actor, a grieving husband, or just another soul whose Hollywood dream became a nightmare. The evidence here is startling. While investigators have captured disembodied whispers on audio, the most frequent proof is photographic. Countless pictures taken near Virginia Rappe's crypt show bizarre, unexplained phenomena, glowing orbs of light, strange mists, and streaks of energy that weren't visible to the naked eye. It's as if her tragic energy is so potent, it can literally burn itself onto film. Psychic mediums and paranormal researchers who have walked these halls all use the same word to describe this place: a vortex. They believe it's not just haunted by individual spirits, but that it's a swirling concentration of immense psychic energy. The powerful, often narcissistic personalities of the stars buried here, combined with their dramatic lives and tragic ends, creates a feedback loop of paranormal activity. This isn't one ghost story. It's 1,000 of them, all playing out at once. Are the spirits of Hollywood forever trapped here by the tragedies that cut their lives short? Or in some way, are they still performing, still seeking the adoration and attention they craved in life, finding an eternal audience in the terrified visitors who come seeking a thrill? Either way, they are not resting, and they are not at peace. Hollywood's ghosts are trapped by their own ambition and tragedy. Their sins are personal, etched onto their own tombstones. But what about a haunting born not from the sins of individuals, but from the sins of an entire city district? In San Francisco, a church was built as a beacon of morality, staring down one of the most infamous neighborhoods of vice and depravity in American history. It survived fire and earthquake, but it could not escape the darkness it was built to oppose. Instead, it absorbed it, becoming a sanctuary not for the living, but for the damned souls of the Barbary Coast. We've journeyed through California's blood-soaked missions and tragic chapels, but the darkness isn't confined to the past. In the heart of its biggest cities, the dead refuse to stay silent. Haunted Church Number 7, Old St. Mary's Cathedral, San Francisco. Some churches are built to embrace a community, others are built as a fortress against it. In the mid-19th century, as San Francisco swelled with the fever of the gold rush, it built its first great cathedral, and they placed it deliberately on a borderline. On one side, the respectable heart of a growing city. On the other, the infamous 9-block vortex of depravity known as the Barbary Coast. This was a church built as a warning. On its tall clock tower, facing the brothels and gambling dens, they inscribed a message for all to see. Son, observe the time and fly from evil. It was a righteous finger, pointed directly at the heart of America's most notorious neighborhood. But a warning is a two-way street, and sometimes the darkness you're warning against stares right back. To stand outside Old St. Mary's at night, even now, is to feel the ghosts of that era. The sounds of modern traffic seem to fade, and you can almost hear it on the wind. The phantom tin pan piano music from a forgotten saloon, the distant shouts of a drunken brawl, the desperate laughter of women who had no other choice. The church was a silent stone witness to it all. The sailors drugged and kidnapped or shanghaied for unwilling service on merchant ships. The fortunes won and lost on the turn of a card. The countless lives chewed up and spit out by the city's unquenchable appetites. Then came 1906. The Great Quake. The city buckled, and then it burned. The Barbary Coast was wiped from the map, consumed by an inferno that leveled nearly everything around it. But Old St. Mary's, its brick walls and its defiant clock tower, refused to fall. It was gutted by the flames, but it stood. It was as if the building itself was too stubborn, too saturated with the prayers and miseries of the last 50 years, to simply be erased. And that's the heart of this haunting. The church didn't just survive the sins of its neighborhood, it absorbed them. Security guards who have locked up the empty cathedral for the night tell the same unsettling stories. You're alone, the heavy doors are bolted, every light is off, and then you hear it, the distinct creak of a wooden pew in the immense darkness, as if someone just sat down. You see a flicker of movement in your peripheral vision, a shadow that detaches itself from the other shadows and glides down an aisle. The most common sightings are of them, the ghosts of the Barbary Coast. They are seen as dark, silent figures in period clothing, men in sailors' coats and women in the tattered finery of a dance hall girl, sitting quietly in the back pews. They don't seem to be menacing. They seem exhausted, as if after more than a century of wandering, they finally made it inside the one place that offered salvation, seeking a sanctuary in death they never found in life. The most heartbreaking apparition is that of a lone woman, seen kneeling at the main altar. Her body shakes with silent sobs, a perfect pantomime of grief. It's believed she is the spirit of a prostitute from a nearby brothel who would sneak into the church to pray for escape, but was murdered before she ever found it. Now her prayer is eternal. Paranormal teams investigating the cathedral have captured chilling evidence. While the guards see them with their eyes, thermal cameras see a different reality. Sweeping the empty nave, their cameras register distinct, human-shaped cold spots, sitting row by row in the pews. A congregation of the cold and the dead, their spectral forms invisible to the naked eye, but their lack of heat a stark signature of their presence. Experts don't see this as a malevolent haunting. Instead, they believe Old St. Mary's has become a spiritual refuge. It spent so long as the sole beacon of light in a sea of darkness that the lost and tormented souls of the Barbary Coast were drawn to it like moths to a flame. They are not here to scare. They are here because they have nowhere else to go. So is Old St. Mary's a place to be feared? Or is it a place of immense sadness, a final eternal sanctuary for the city's forgotten sinners? When the guards see a shadow move in the dark, perhaps it's not a threat, perhaps it's just another lost soul, finally finding a seat in the house of God. The rage of the famous, the sorrow of the forgotten, so many of these hauntings are born from pain. They are loud, emotional echoes of a life cut short. But there is another kind of haunting, one not born of tragedy or sin. What if the spirits that remain are not prisoners of the past, but its loving caretakers? In a small handcrafted church, also in San Francisco, the original builders were so in love with their creation, it said they never left. Their presence isn't frightening because it's evil, it's frightening because it's there. A gentle touch on the shoulder in an empty room, a presence felt but never seen, can sometimes be the most unnerving ghost of all. Haunted Church Number 8, the Swedenborgian Church, San Francisco. We have spoken of ghosts born from violence, from tragedy, and from sin, spirits trapped by the worst moments of their lives. But what if a ghost isn't a prisoner? What if it's a volunteer? What if a spirit remains not out of pain, but out of pure, unending love for a place? And what if that is somehow even more unnerving? Tucked away in a quiet San Francisco neighborhood, there is a church that feels like no other. It's not a grand cathedral of stone and marble. It's a warm, intimate space of wood and glass. This is the Swedenborgian Church, a masterpiece of the arts and crafts movement, built in 1895. To step inside is to feel like you've entered a sacred forest grove. The massive beams holding up the ceiling are not milled timber, they are whole madrone trees, their natural reddish bark still intact, hauled from the mountains of Santa Cruz. The chairs are simple, the fireplace crackles, it feels alive. This place was the passion project of its first pastor, Reverend Joseph Worcester. He and a community of famous artists and craftsmen poured their souls into every detail, seeking to create a space where God and nature were one. It was, by every account, a true labor of love, and the legend here is simple: their labor never ended. It is said that Reverend Worcester and the artists who helped him build this sanctuary loved it so much in life, they simply chose not to leave it in death. There are no stories here of screams in the night, no violent objects being thrown. The haunting of the Swedenborgian Church is a gentle one, and that is precisely what makes it so terrifying. Imagine you are there, alone, standing in the quiet sanctuary, admiring the way the light filters through the century-old stained glass. Suddenly, you feel it. A distinct, gentle, reassuring pressure on your shoulder, a friendly hand offering comfort. You turn, smiling, expecting to see the church caretaker or another visitor. But there is no one there. You are completely, utterly alone. The heavy wooden doors are closed, the room is silent, but the feeling of that hand, the weight of it, the warmth of it, was undeniably real. This is the most common testimony, a touch from an unseen presence. It's happened to dozens of people over the decades, often during the quiet, emotional moments of a wedding ceremony. It is never aggressive. It feels paternal, like a blessing from a spirit who approves of the love being celebrated in his home. But a touch is a touch. It is a physical violation of your reality, from a world that is not supposed to be able to make contact. Other accounts are just as subtle and just as chilling. The soft shuffling sound of footsteps on the wooden floor of an empty room. The fleeting glimpse of a wispy, translucent figure sitting in one of the maple chairs, who vanishes the very instant you turn your head to get a better look. The evidence captured here reflects the nature of the haunting. There are no demonic growls on audio recorders. Instead, investigators have captured the faint sounds of those same soft footsteps and whispers that are too quiet to be understood. The most common proof is found in photographs. Hundreds of pictures, especially from weddings, show beautiful, unexplained orbs of light hovering over the bride and groom or near the fireplace Worcester himself designed. Paranormal analysts describe this as a rare form of benevolent haunting. The spirits of Worcester and his friends are not trapped by trauma. They are bound by an enduring love for their creation. They are the eternal caretakers, the loving hosts of this sacred space. They aren't trying to frighten anyone, but that raises a deeply unsettling question. Does a ghost's friendly intention make the experience any less terrifying for the living? Think about it. The realization that the veil between our world and the next is so impossibly thin that a spirit, friendly or not, can reach out across that divide and physically touch you. The knowledge that even in a place of peace and love, you are never ever truly alone. Is that a comfort, or is that the most profoundly disturbing thought of all? A weeping nun, a watching monk, a benevolent founder, all these spirits are tied to places of supposed sanctuary. Even in their gentlest form, they remind us that the dead walk among us. But there is another kind of sanctuary, a place that was never holy, a place built not for salvation, but for punishment of the highest order. On an infamous rock in the middle of San Francisco Bay, there was a chapel, but no amount of prayer could pierce the suffocating despair of the prison that surrounded it. Here, the ghosts aren't lost souls seeking comfort. They are the damned, and their choir sings a song of pure, unending misery. Haunted location number 9, the chapel, Alcatraz Island, San Francisco Bay. There are places on this earth so saturated with human misery, so charged with despair, that they become wounds on the landscape. They are not holy, they are not sanctuaries, they are monuments to suffering, and none is more infamous than the island known simply as the Rock. This is Alcatraz, Not just a prison, but a symbol of finality. This was the end of the line, the place America sent the men it considered unbreakable, to be broken. Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, the Birdman of Alcatraz, they all walked these cell blocks, and above the cold, clangorous noise of the dining hall, the prison offered its inmates a final cruel irony, a chapel, a house of God in the middle of a man-made hell. But any prayers uttered here died before they reached the ceiling. To stand on Alcatraz today is to feel the weight of it. The wind that whips across the bay is relentless and cold. It carries the scent of salt, rust and decay. Inside the cell house, every sound echoes, the clang of a distant steel door, the whisper of another tourist. It all sounds like the ghosts of the past. When you walk up the stairs to the chapel area, the feeling doesn't lessen. It changes. The air grows thick, heavy with the suffocating despair of thousands of men who lived and died, knowing that freedom was just over a mile away, a glittering mirage they could see, but never ever touch. This room wasn't a refuge, it was just a cell with a cross in it. The haunting of Alcatraz isn't born from a single tragedy. It's the result of 29 years of slow, grinding, psychological torment. The enforced silence that could drive a man mad. The isolation of D-Block's solitary confinement cells, known as the Hole, where men were kept in total, soul-crushing darkness. The very spirit of the place was designed to extinguish hope, and that collective extinguishment of hope has left an energy that remains to this day. The most credible testimonies come not from thrill-seeking tourists, but from the stoic national park rangers who are tasked with locking down this island at night. They are the ones who have to walk these corridors alone after the last ferry has departed. They speak of an overwhelming feeling of dread that can suddenly wash over them in certain areas, a gut-wrenching fear that makes them want to turn and run. They report hearing their names whispered from empty cells. They've heard the sounds of men running down the corridors, only to find nothing. Doors to solitary confinement cells which weigh hundreds of pounds have been heard slamming shut on their own. One investigator, testing for electronic voice phenomena, asked into the darkness, "Is someone here?" The recording that came back was a clear, guttural, malevolent voice that said simply, "Get out." But the most profoundly disturbing evidence to come from this place, specifically from the area around the chapel and hospital ward, isn't a whisper. It's a chorus. Paranormal teams have left audio recorders running for hours in the dead of night. When they play back the tapes, they capture a sound that defies all logical explanation. It is not the wind. It is not the distant city. It is the sound of what has become known as the unholy choir, a low, droning, discordant moan, a sound like dozens of men humming a single sorrowful note in unison. It's a chorus of pure, unending misery. The sound of broken spirits. Paranormal analysts believe Alcatraz acts as a massive psychic battery, charged for nearly 3 decades with the most intense human emotions, rage, regret, and above all hopelessness. That unholy choir, they theorize, is the slow release of that stored energy. It's the unified spectral moan of every man who lost his soul on that rock. It isn't the sound of ghosts trying to communicate. It is the sound of damnation itself. The prison is closed, the inmates are long gone, but their suffering was so absolute, it became a permanent feature of the island. The chapel that was built to offer them a sliver of salvation in life offers them no peace in death. The spirits of Alcatraz are not waiting for forgiveness. They are not seeking a way to move on. They are still there, in the dark, in the cold, eternally serving their sentence. The ghosts of Alcatraz are a testament to concentrated human misery, a haunting born inside walls built to break the spirit. But not all prisons have steel bars. Sometimes the prison is an entire way of life. We leave the cold rock of the bay and travel inland to the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, to the heart of the gold rush. Here, the ghosts aren't criminals but pioneers, and their stories are not of damnation, but of deep heartbreaking sorrow, of fortunes promised and lives lost. In one old mining town, a lonely church holds the grief of a woman who has been weeping for over 150 years. Haunted Church Number 10. St. Patrick's Catholic Church, Sonora, California. The California Gold Rush. The name itself sounds like an adventure, a promise of glory and unimaginable wealth, a fever that drew hundreds of thousands of people to the foothills of the Sierra Nevada to stake their claim and change their fortunes. But for most, the promise was a lie. The fever didn't bring wealth, it brought hardship, violence, and for so many, an early, unmarked grave. We travel now to Sonora, the queen of the southern mines, a town built on that broken promise. In the 1850s, this was a place of chaos. The days were filled with back-breaking labor, and the nights were filled with whiskey, gambling, and the constant threat of a knife in the back over a pouch of gold dust. Mining camps were breeding grounds for disease. Accidents in the mines, cave-ins, explosions were a daily occurrence. Death was a constant, unwelcome neighbor. And standing in the middle of it all was St. Patrick's Church, the place that had to witness and sanctify all that loss. It was the final stop for the men whose luck had run out. To stand in the church today is to feel that weight. The building is beautiful, a brick survivor from an era of wood and canvas, but inside there is a quiet, profound sadness that seems to have soaked into the very pews. It's the feeling of 1,000 funerals, the collective memory of countless goodbyes said by wives and mothers who had followed their men into this wild country, only to be left alone, widowed and impoverished, thousands of miles from anything they had ever called home. And it is from this immense collective grief that a legend was born, the legend of the Lady in Blue. For generations, the people of Sonora have told the stories. It always happens in the quiet hours of the late afternoon as the sun begins to set. A staff member or a parishioner will be alone in the church, preparing to lock up for the night. They'll glance toward the front of the sanctuary and see a woman they don't recognize. She is always dressed in what looks like old-fashioned 19th century clothing, a dress of faded blue. She is kneeling in one of the pews, her head bowed in prayer. Assuming she is a visitor lost in a moment of devotion, they will start to walk toward her, to gently let her know the church is closing. As they get closer, they see that her shoulders are shaking. She is weeping, deep, silent, heartbreaking sobs. They call out softly, "Mom, are you all right?" And then it happens. She slowly raises her head, and for a fleeting moment they see a face contorted by a grief so pure and so absolute that it steals the breath from their lungs. And then she simply dissolves. She fades away like smoke, leaving nothing behind but an empty pew, and the witness, standing frozen, their heart pounding with an equal mix of terror and a sudden overwhelming wave of empathy. While she has never been captured on video, her sorrowful energy seems to leave an imprint on film. Over the years, multiple photographs taken inside the church have, upon being developed, revealed a strange, inexplicable anomaly. A misty, human-like shape with a distinct bluish hue, hovering in the very pews where the Lady in Blue is most often seen. Paranormal folklore from all over the world is filled with tales of these spectral women, the woman in white, or in this case blue, ghosts of eternal grief, forever mourning a tragedy they could not prevent. Experts believe the Lady in Blue of Sonora is a classic, powerful example of this archetype. She is not angry, she is not malevolent. She is a purely residual haunting, an echo of a sorrow so powerful it has outlived the woman who first felt it. She is trapped in the last place she came to pray for a miracle that never came. So who is she, really? Is she the spirit of one specific woman, doomed to weep for a husband buried in a collapsed mineshaft, or has she become something more? The collective embodiment of every wife and mother who lost everything to the dream of gold, her spectral form a permanent monument to the true heartbreaking price of the gold rush, forever kneeling in the church that saw it all. The gold rush, the missions, the Barbary Coast, so many of California's ghosts are echoes of a distant, violent past. But not all ghosts are from 100 years ago. Sometimes the energy of an event is so powerful, so charged with passion and purpose, that it leaves its mark almost immediately. We now travel back to Los Angeles, to a community church that became the nerve center for a modern revolution. Here the spirits aren't weeping over lost gold or dead husbands. They are still fighting, and in the dead of night you can still hear the echoes of their speeches and the footfalls of a movement that refuses to die. Haunted Church number 11. The Church of the Epiphany, Lincoln Heights, Los Angeles. Not all ghosts are ancient. Not all hauntings are born from dusty, long-forgotten tragedies. Some are new. Some are born from the fire and passion of modern history, so powerful and so recent that the energy hasn't even had time to settle. Some ghosts are still fighting for a cause. We return to Los Angeles, to the neighborhood of Lincoln Heights, and to a humble Episcopal church that, for a brief, critical time in American history, became the heart of a revolution. On the surface, the Church of the Epiphany is just a community parish, but in the late 1960s it became the unofficial headquarters and sanctuary for the Chicano movement. This wasn't just a place of worship, this was a war room. Step inside today and it feels like any other active church, but go downstairs, go into the basement. The air down here is different. It crackles with a kind of static electricity. It doesn't feel like a crypt or a tomb. It feels charged. Like you've walked into a room where a high-stakes meeting has just ended, and the passion and anger of the debate still hangs in the air, and for good reason. It was in this very basement that history was made. This is where activists like Cesar Chavez and Rosalio Munoz met to plan marches and protests. This is where the Brown Berets organized. This is where the influential newspaper La Raza, the voice of the movement, was printed, the smell of fresh ink mixing with the fervor of rebellion. The arguments were passionate. The stakes were impossibly high. They were fighting for their rights, for their identity, for their place in America. And they did it all from this church basement, protected by a priest who believed their cause was just. That kind of energy, that much hope, anger and determination, all concentrated in one small space. It doesn't just dissipate, it leaves a mark. The staff and clergy at the church today will tell you, the building is not at rest. A priest, working late in his office, will hear it rising up from the floor below, not a single voice, but the muffled rhythmic cadence of a passionate argument. The sound of many voices, overlapping, debating. He'll go downstairs, expecting to find a meeting he'd forgotten, only to open the door to a dark, empty and utterly silent room. The sounds stop the instant the door is opened. Others have been working alone in the building and have suddenly smelled it, the sharp chemical scent of old printing ink, a smell that hasn't been present in this basement for decades. Some have even heard the phantom sound of an old printing press running, a ghostly clatter and hum from a machine long gone. In the main meeting room, shadowy figures have been seen gathered around the tables, their forms indistinct but their purpose clear, only to vanish the second a light is flicked on. The evidence captured here is as unique as the haunting itself. Investigators conducting EVP sessions in the basement have recorded something extraordinary, not the whisper of a single spirit, but the sound of a crowd. The faint but unmistakable sound of a passionate speech being delivered, followed by what sounds like muffled applause or shouting. It is the sound of a rally of ghosts. Paranormal analysts believe the Church of the Epiphany is a perfect modern example of the stone tape theory. The idea is that the building itself, the stone, the wood, the very air, has acted like a magnetic tape, and the intense, powerful emotional events of the Chicano movement were recorded onto it. The haunting isn't a conscious spirit trying to communicate. It is a recording of history, replaying itself under the right conditions. The church's basement was a pressure cooker of emotion, and it permanently absorbed the sound and the fury of those who fought there. The ghosts of the Church of the Epiphany aren't souls in torment. They are the immortal, passionate energy of a struggle for justice. They are a powerful, unsettling reminder that the great battles of the past are never truly over, and if you listen closely enough in the places that mattered, their voices can still be heard. A political movement, a weeping woman, an angry nun. These spirits make their presence known. They cry out, they argue, they demand to be heard. Their energy is directed outward, but there is a deeper, more personal form of fear. The fear that comes not from a sound, but from absolute silence. The fear of being singled out. We travel now to a mission, where the haunting is not a public performance, but a private judgment. Here, a lone figure stands at the end of a long, dark hall. He doesn't want to be heard by a crowd. He only wants to be seen by you. And his silent, unending gaze is a horror all its own. Haunted Church Number 12, Mission Santa Ynez, Solvang, California. What is true fear? Is it a loud noise in the dark? Is it a violent, angry spirit? Or is it something quieter? What if the most terrifying ghost is the one that doesn't scream, doesn't throw things, doesn't make its presence known to a crowd, but chooses, in a moment of absolute silence, to reveal itself only to you? We travel now to a place of picturesque beauty, Mission Santa Ynez, nestled in the storybook town of Solvang. On the surface, it is perhaps the most peaceful and immaculately preserved of all the California missions. But even this tranquil place was born from conflict, surviving the violent Chumash revolt of 1824, and it seems that an echo of that conflict, or perhaps a guardian from its long history, remains. It is a place of profound quiet and profound unease. The mission is famous for its long, beautiful, arched corridors. As you walk down them, your footsteps echoing on the cool stone, the play of light and shadow is hypnotic. It's the perfect place for your eyes to play tricks on you. A flicker of movement, a shape in the distance. You tell yourself it's nothing. But at Mission Santa Ines, you're not always right. This is the home of the Watcher. The legend isn't a complex story of tragedy. It is a singular, persistent, and deeply personal phenomenon. It happens like this. You are walking alone down one of the long, empty hallways. You glance toward the far end, and you see him, a figure, tall, dark, and still, possibly a monk in a hooded robe. He is always at a distance, partially obscured by the shadows of an archway. He does not move. He does not make a sound. He just stands there, and he is looking right at you. You can feel his gaze across the distance, a feeling of intense, focused scrutiny. It's as if you are being weighed, measured, and judged by a being that does not belong here. You freeze. Your mind races, trying to process what you're seeing. Is it a statue? A tour guide? You blink. You look down for a fraction of a second to steady yourself. And when you look back up, he's gone. The hallway is completely empty. There is nowhere he could have gone. He has simply vanished. This is the experience that has been reported, consistently, for decades. By visitors, by museum staff, by the priests themselves. It is always the same. The silent figure at the end of the hall, the unnerving, piercing gaze, and the impossible disappearance. It is a one-on-one encounter with the unknown. In a place this quiet, the only constant witness is the security camera. And while no camera has captured a clear image of the Watcher, they have captured something else. Technicians reviewing hours of footage from cameras pointed down these long corridors have found recurring, inexplicable glitches. For no reason, the digital feed will distort for a single frame. A flash of static, a momentary blur, a dark, shadowy corruption that blocks the lens. And it always happens in the exact spot where the Watcher is most often reported to stand. It's as if his very presence is an anomaly that modern technology cannot properly compute. Paranormal analysts are fascinated by this haunting. It isn't a memory loop, and it shows no signs of the violent energy of a poltergeist. This, they believe, is a haunting designed to create pure psychological fear. The entity seems to be in complete control of the encounter. It chooses who sees it. It reveals itself just enough to register, to confirm its existence, and then it withdraws, leaving the witness in a state of shock, questioning their own senses, their own sanity. The terror isn't in what the Watcher does. It's in the cold, calculated intelligence behind it. It's in the unanswered question of what he could do, if he chose to. Who is this silent observer? Is he the spirit of a protective Franciscan friar, still guarding his beloved mission? Is he the ghost of a Chumash warrior, forever watching over his ancestral land? Or is he something else entirely, an ancient entity whose purpose is unknown? You leave Mission Santa Ines, but the feeling of his gaze that stays with you long after you're gone. We've seen the ghosts of rage, of sorrow, of passion, and of quiet observation. We've seen singular spirits, forever bound to their pain. But for our final story, we travel to a place where the dead are not alone, a place where the haunting is not a single voice, but a legion. In California's capital city, there is a chapel that stands guard over one of the most haunted cemeteries in the nation. It doesn't hold one ghost, it holds them all. It is a focal point for the city's dead, a final congregation for the restless. This isn't just a haunted church, it's an antechamber to the underworld. Our final destination, Haunted Church number 13, the Pioneer Chapel, Sacramento Historic City Cemetery. We have arrived at the end of our journey. We've witnessed hauntings born from singular violent acts and from the slow grinding despair of entire lifetimes. But what if a haunting isn't just one spirit? What if it's not just a handful? What if a holy place becomes a beacon for an entire city of the dead? Welcome to the Sacramento Historic City Cemetery, founded in 1849. This is not just a graveyard. This is a sprawling necropolis, a final restless home to over 25,000 souls. It holds the victims of the gold rush, of cholera epidemics, of fires and steamboat disasters. Its grounds are walked by countless well-known spirits, and standing at its heart, a small Gothic building keeps a lonely vigil, the Pioneer Chapel. It was built to host the final goodbyes for the dead, but it seems the dead never wanted to leave. To walk this cemetery as dusk settles is to feel yourself being watched by a silent, stone-faced population. Weeping angels seem to follow you with their eyes. Weathered tombstones stand like soldiers in the fading light. But as you approach the chapel, the feeling changes. It's no longer just the quiet sorrow of a graveyard. The air here feels crowded. charged, as if this small wooden building is a spiritual magnet, pulling in the restless energy from every corner of this haunted land. This cemetery has its famous residents. There is the spirit of William Brown, a volunteer fireman who died heroically, and whose ghost is still said to watch over his own grand tomb. And most famously, there is the ghost of little May Woolsey, a 12-year-old girl taken by yellow fever in 1879. Her playful, energetic spirit is still seen and heard, darting between the headstones, her laughter sometimes caught on the wind. She is a ghost so well known, people leave toys for her at her grave, and it is these spirits and hundreds more who are drawn to the chapel. It is the last consecrated ground they knew in life. For them it is not a place of fear, it is a place of assembly. The encounters here are breathtaking in their clarity. Ghost tour guides tell stories of stopping their groups near the chapel, only to have a visitor tug on their sleeve and ask, "Who is that woman by the door?" The whole group will turn to see her, a full-bodied apparition of a lady dressed head to toe in black, Victorian mourning clothes, a heavy veil covering her face. She stands by the chapel door as if waiting for a funeral service to begin. She looks completely solid, completely real, and then as everyone watches, she simply dissolves into the evening air. Through the chapel's own windows, people have seen more. They have seen the pews inside occupied by silent, seated figures, men and women in 19th century attire, a ghostly congregation that vanishes the moment you try to get a closer look. The muffled sound of weeping has been heard from within the locked and empty building, the collective sorrow of 100 funerals all echoing at once. But the single most chilling piece of evidence to come from the Pioneer Chapel is a photograph, a simple clear picture of the chapel's exterior. But when you look closely, in the dark glass of an upper window, you can see it, the pale, small, unmistakable face of a young girl, peering out at the world, a face that paranormal researchers and local historians are certain belongs to May Woolsey. It's as if she and the other spirits use the chapel as their own home, looking out from the windows at the living, who now walk their sacred ground. Paranormal analysts believe the Pioneer Chapel is a unique and overwhelming supernatural hotspot. It is a spiritual beacon. It does not have a single dedicated haunting. It is the focal point for the entire cemetery. The sad, the lonely, the protective, the playful, all the spirits are drawn here, seeking a memory of comfort, a sense of community, or perhaps just a familiar place to gather in their long afterlife. And so our journey ends here, in a church that is not home to one ghost but to a legion, a final spectral congregation. We have seen how California's holy places built for peace, for prayer, and for eternal rest have, through massacre, tragedy, injustice, and sorrow, become its most profoundly haunted landmarks. They stand as a testament to the idea that the human spirit and the energy of its most powerful emotions can outlast stone, wood, and even time itself. They are a chilling reminder that sacred ground is only sacred until the dead decide to claim it as their own. From massacred families in blood-soaked missions to heartbroken lovers searching the ruins for a love that no longer exists. From the vengeful spirit of a hanged man to the silent watching monk in an endless lonely vigil, we have seen how the ghosts of Hollywood tragedy, the sorrow of the gold rush, and the fire of modern revolution have all left their indelible mark. These churches of California, built as monuments to faith, have become silent stone witnesses to the darkest parts of our history. They are a testament to one chilling idea: no wall, no matter how sacred, can keep out the sorrows of the past. So what are these encounters? Are these truly the conscious voices of the dead, reaching out from beyond the veil in anger, love, or grief? Or are they merely echoes of history, psychic scars imprinted on time itself, replaying their most traumatic moments for eternity? Perhaps the truth is, it doesn't matter. Because one thing is certain, these places are not at peace. So the next time you find yourself standing in an old church, and a quiet moment settles around you, listen closely. Past the faded memory of prayers and the echo of hymns, you might just hear it. A whisper that doesn't belong. The footstep of a soul who has never left. A soul still waiting, still watching, still haunting. The stories have been told, but the mystery remains. Have you ever had a paranormal experience in a place of worship? A feeling you couldn't explain, a sound that shouldn't have been there? Share your own chilling story in the comments below. We read every single one. If you believe some places and some spirits should be left undisturbed, hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe and turn on all notifications, because you won't want to miss our next investigation into the darkness. Until next time, try to stay in the light.